McGrowl, Book 2, Chapter 3, Crime and Punishment. McGrowl slept well. Thomas didn't. He tossed and turned and worried the night away. He had bad news for his new friend. McGrowl would not be going to school with Thomas in the morning. He wouldn't be competing in the dog show either. On those 2 points Mr. Wiggins was adamant. "You're lucky I'm not sending that animal back where it came from," Mr. Wiggins sternly admonished Thomas. Of course, this was clearly an idle threat. Neither Thomas nor his father had the remotest idea where that was. McGrowl rolled over peacefully in Thomas's warm, cosy bed, blissfully unaware of the consequences of his actions the night before. He was dreaming of mashed potatoes. A dollop of golden yellow butter was melting right in the middle of the mound. Rich brown gravy floated all around the edges of the platter. The dog started gobbling enormous bites of the stuff. Unfortunately, what he was actually eating was Thomas's pillow. His sharp incisors tore large holes in the ticking, and feathers were flying everywhere. Thomas was already up and had just run in to look for his windbreaker. "What are you doing?" he exclaimed, seeing the mess. McGrowl woke up, spit out a mouthful of feathers, and wondered the exact same thing when he saw that Thomas was dressed and attempting to leave without him. Who knew what evil was lurking just around the corner? He was not about to let his boy go to school unchaperoned. Besides, he loved getting his daily treat from the jolly crossing guard, and took great pride in the fact that Thomas always let him carry his books. He never dropped a single one, and always double-checked to make certain Thomas hadn't left an important homework assignment behind. And anyway, he was looking forward to the big dog show tryouts this afternoon. Only the first 5 to place in the obedience trials would be allowed to compete in next month's finals. The winner of the finals would take home the gleaming silver trophy. He felt a warm glow all over when he thought about how proud Thomas was going to be when they carried it home and put it on the mantel. He was going to school today, and that's all there was to it. The dog gave Thomas a look that managed to convey both enormous sadness and great annoyance simultaneously. The expression had the desired effect. Thomas was instantly engulfed in a wave of guilt. "It's not my fault," Thomas began. "You can't go to school with me today. Dad says so." As the boy did his best to make an order of the extremely rumpled bed, McGrowl lowered his head and looked as if he might begin to cry. "Please don't do that. I feel bad enough as it is." Thomas located the jacket and started out of the room. McGrowl ran to the door and threw himself between it and the boy. "I'll come right home after school. I promise." The dog didn't budge. "We're going to get in serious trouble if you don't do exactly what my father says." Still no response. "He might not even let you stay here any more, McGrowl." The dog reluctantly moved away from the door. "Good boy," Thomas said, and leaned over to give him a hug. "You really wanted to be in the dog show, didn't you?" The dog let out a pitiful moan. "There's always next year. We'll have lots more time to practice." The dog pointed his big brown nose straight up at the ceiling and howled pathetically. "No more complaining. It's just the way it is." The boy was out the door and halfway down the stairs. McGrowl let out a few more howls. When he saw they weren't doing any good, he gave up, looked out the window and sulked. At last he spied Mr. Wiggins hurrying into the garage and then out again in his shiny new Oldsmobile. Mrs. Wiggins ran out to borrow a pinch of saffron from Alicia's mum. The dog sprang into action. He pushed open the window with his sturdy snout and leapt onto the roof. He watched as a Federal Express truck headed past and quickly jumped right onto it. He would be at Thomas's school in a couple of minutes. The bell rang for first period, and Thomas took his seat for homeroom. He had just finished his unhappy task of explaining to the lower school principal that his dog wasn't feeling well and wouldn't be able to be in the dog show today. McGrowl waited patiently outside the window, careful not to let Thomas see him. He surveyed the area around the little school. He was always on the lookout for the evil duo who had abducted him and almost kidnapped the boy earlier that month. Thankfully, they were nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, McGrowl heard his name being called. McGrowl! McGrowl! But where was the voice coming from? Surely no one in the building had spotted him. The bush he was hiding beside rendered him practically invisible. Again he heard the insistent call. The dog looked this way and that, and then he focused his powerful sense of hearing in the direction of the Wiggins house. As clearly as if she was standing right next to him, he could hear Mrs. Wiggins' voice calling him. And then, even though school was a good 3 miles away from home, he concentrated with all his might, and Thomas's bedroom window came into perfect view. He could see Mrs. Wiggins sticking her neck out and yelling down the street. "You come back here this instant! I mean it! McGrowl! Are you listening to me? You're a naughty, naughty dog!" And before you could say Jiminy Cricket, the dog was off in a flash. He went into hyper gear and sped back home so fast he was almost invisible. If you had decided to look in his direction, all you would have seen was a bunch of leaves swirling around and what looked like a yellow tornado. The entire journey took less than 3 seconds. Before she even had a chance to turn around, the dog made a beeline into the house, up the stairs and into the bed. Mrs. Wiggins headed for the door. McGrowl jumped out of the bed, wagging his tail as if he'd been there the whole time. He rushed over to Mrs. Wiggins, licked her hand happily and barked a cheery hello. The poor woman nearly jumped out of her skin. "Where? What? Oh, how in the world?" She couldn't manage to get anything else out. She rubbed her eyes to see if she was dreaming. She had searched high and low and not found a single trace of the dog anywhere. Strange, very strange. McGrowl leapt out of the window for the second time that morning and hurried back to school and his special hiding place in the bushes by the windows. Meanwhile, Thomas and the rest of his class were in the process of receiving some pretty disturbing news.